From 2015 to 2023, Nigeria rolled out NPAR and conditional cash transfers, among other social investments, targeting millions living below the poverty line. Behind the scene was a quiet reformer, Maryam Uwais, MFR, a lawyer, activist, and policy strategist. She led efforts to design inclusive programs that reached the most vulnerable, especially women and children. As the former special advisor on social investment and founder of the Isa Wali Empowerment Initiative, she has spent decades fighting for economic justice, child protection, and gender equity. This NESG TV episode seeks to unpack the bold ideas, quiet victories, and tough lessons from nearly a decade of public service.
Welcome to this episode of NESG TV. I'm Francis Jackbo.
And I am Sheriff Aderibigbe, and we will be your hosts on today's episode.
Whenever conditional cash transfers, NPAR, ACP, and such projects are mentioned, a name always comes to mind, and it's Mrs. Maryam Uwais, MFR. What's striking about her is a passion for impact, a passion for the well-being of the vulnerable, of the underserved, and the multidimensionally poor. She's a former special advisor to President Muhammadu Buhari on social investments. She's also a lawyer, activist, and policy strategist. Now, she has a very impactful story to tell, which is why we have her in the studio and we'll be hearing her story. Welcome.
Thank you.
So people, I mean, it's making that transition from law, which is your traditional core, to social investments. It's a major switch. Can you just tell us how that transition came to be?
So I don't know that I consciously went for law, because I was actually not admitted into ABU. I went to Queen's College, Lagos, and I applied to universities, Ife, Ibadan, Lagos, but I was not given admission, and my results were good, so I went to ABU. That time it was Professor Ango Abdullahi, and I walked into his office. I just sat outside and I said to him, please, I'd like to. So he looked at my results and said, why didn't you apply to ABU? I said, well, I was in Lagos, and so I applied to Lagos. So he said, okay, what do you want to study? I said, history, because I loved history, I loved literature. But I had an older brother, passed on 2 years ago, general, very tough. He said to me, don't study history, study law. Law is where they think, and apologies to historians. These were his views as a soldier. He said to me, historians just repeat what they're told. They don't reflect, they don't review. That was his own perception. So he practically marched me back to the authorities then, and I said, okay, I want to study law. And that's how I got into law. But from childhood, we've had, an upbringing that emphasized or prioritized fairness, justice, from the faith, derived from the faith. I come from a family of scholars. I am not an Islamic scholar, but my parents were. My grandfather was the Wali of Kano, and he challenged the status quo, challenged the emir on some traditional practices. And then my father did the same thing. He challenged the oppression of a lot of people who are paying tax to the emir. And then he started writing articles on women's rights in Islam. So he challenged the issues of purdah, polygamy. There were so many things he spoke about, and he was engaging, the imams then in Kano. And they got very upset because he spoke classical Arabic and reported him to the emir. And the emir said, you people respond. This is a debate he started. This was in the 50s. So as we grew up, we lost him when I was 6, but it used to resound, a lot of the times when we speak up, people say you must be Isa Wali's daughter, and thank God when I turned 50, we actually set up an NGO in his honor, just for women and children, and the greatest joy I have is going to communities in Kano, and I see little Isa Walis named after him, and prayers for him. But I got into law, and when I finished, I was more interested in constitutional law And my thesis was on Chapter 2 rights, fundamental objectives and directive principles of state policy. And it's basically where socioeconomic rights are situated. So I began my practice with that frame of mind. And I kept veering back. I was a state council in Kano, but I kept veering back into spaces where people's rights were being infringed. And even after I got married, it was evident. And I got appointed onto the National Human Rights Commission board. And we went into every state. I used to go into all the prisons, all the remand homes where they existed, to try and see how we could help people. And it opened my eyes to so many, it's like we live in a different world from what's happening out there. And I served on the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. I served on the boards of many NGOs. And so I think ultimately I met Professor Yemi Oshibajo. We sued actually the Pfizer over the Trojan. Yeah, we sued tobacco companies because they poisoned people's, I'll say that anywhere, and so we're doing a lot of, then he got into politics and then got into, he became vice president. And then he asked me to come in and work as special advisor on social investments. That's how I found myself in that space.
Now, social investment is peculiar because you think the challenges of, gaps in inequality in terms of opportunities, in terms of education, is it something that is, don't you feel it's, what's the vision and what are the milestones to ensure we've even got to a point where we can say, yeah, we're achieving something, you think?
It's really daunting when you think about the work that needs to be done. And bearing in mind the population growth, how hard you try, you can't catch up unless the economy catches up, because babies keep getting born. And interestingly, the lower echelon are the people that have the babies more than the people. So poverty continues to grow. And we need to be strategic. And that's what we tried to do. First and foremost, there's a thing about politics. The politicians tend to want to reward their own. So there's an endemic culture that of favoritism. These are, give me slots. This is my list of people. And challenging that was a problem. It got me into their bad books because I would get a lot of, in fact, cartons of names of people who should be empowered, who should be cooks, and I disregarded it. And what really helped me was I had a vice president who understood and who guided us, who protected me. Because even from my state, there were delegations that reported that I was not taking into account the fact that there were more votes from Kano, so more people needed to be impacted in Kano than any other state. And my argument was, we're looking at population, we're looking at unemployment rates, we're looking at poverty rates. So having done that from the beginning, I'm not going to, because of votes, add more to my state. You understand? We already have a scientific foundation for the numbers we're impacting in every state. So nobody is going to call me and say, look, we did this. Our state did this. And so Professor Shibajo was very protective because he understood. He even supervised the programs. We would sit down and have strategy sessions, and he would encourage us, and the National Assembly was a really traumatic experience for me, because I say it anywhere. I tell them even now, I don't hope to ever go back into the National Assembly. I have a few that supported me. They were very conscious of the need. In fact, even the Senate president at that time understood. But there's a culture that has permeated our political development, and it's about me and mine. You understand? You have people who understand when they're on one side, and then when they become when they're on the other side, and I don't mind saying this publicly, Comrade Adams Oshomole, when he was governor in Edo, I went there and he spoke and he supported me and everything. As soon as he became chairman of APC, it was about, what about APC? Where is APC in all of this? You understand? So it's just crazy. I think we need to depoliticize poverty alleviation efforts, because the people that vote may not even be in politics, but once you become a president, you are vice president, governor, you are responsible for everybody. It is everybody's right to vote for who they want to vote for. That's constitutionally enshrined. So you can't now come and say, he didn't vote for me, so he's not entitled. That's his right. And there are many people that do not even know, if you go into the communities, they don't even know who the name of the governor is, believe me. So they are not even voting, but they are entitled to be supported by government. So the idea was, how do we make this objective? How do we make this open and accessible to as many as possible who are not connected? You understand? How do we ensure that we are able to work at scale? Of course, the answer was digital as much as possible. But anyway, the story is still unfolding.
Okay. Thank you very much, ma'am. It's actually been very, very enlightening. You spent close to 8 years advising on social investment, and your time saw arguably one of Nigeria's biggest social investment program, the NSIP. Where we had trader money. We had Jeep, we had Empower. Now let's look at some of the challenges, for the present administration and even for future administrations. What are the challenges that you think some of these programs had? What did they fall short of doing? And what things should future administrations look at in terms of social investments in order to get down to the people directly?
So let me correct. I was there until 2019. From 2015, as special advisor, we pioneered the social investment programs. It wasn't me, it was a team. And we all had the same vision, and it was driven by Professor Oshibajo. By the time we had the elections, there were enough politicians that were upset with me. And I heard October 1st that a new ministry had been created, and I had been moved there. So my cover was removed. And I was taken before a politician who incidentally had asked before for slots. So from day one, it didn't work. I had expectations that it had become the process. We had divided payments, accounts, procurement from the effort, because I didn't want to be, engaged on those issues. Otherwise, you won't do any work, right? So we're focusing on implementation. Payments, accounts, procurement was done by the Ministry for Budget. It wasn't done, Ministry for Budget and Planning, it wasn't done by the State House. So I didn't know who got anything. I just used to get a schedule of beneficiaries, the poor people, the cooks, the Empower, and I would send it to Budget and Planning. We had meetings with NIPS, and so we had NIN numbers and account numbers, BVNs, for those Empower. In fact, we use that as verification for authenticity. If you're truly a youth, you apply, you have to put in your BVN, and your name must match your BVN and all of that. So we needed that first and foremost. Now, when the ministry was created, everything was lumped in one ministry. And I now needed her approval for payments. and approvals were delayed deliberately, because there were certain demands that I was not about to change the process. In short, I didn't last 2 months. She wrote a memo to the president that she couldn't work with me because I was not about to budge or change. And she was now minister. And in his wisdom, the president just said, okay, relocate her back to the office of the vice president, which was a huge relief for me because it was the most miserable 2 months of my life, you know, getting Empower cooks that you know rely on this small money. They were not being paid because we needed the sign off. So that's how I started ARC-P. The second from 20, yeah, that's how I started ARC-P. You know, so I'm not sure how it unfolded after it moved to human. I heard all kinds of stories, you know, but I was determined to stay away. It was enough for me, and as Professor Shibajo used to tell me all the time, you know, we proved that it could be done, and so it can be done again, you know. And he said, you know, start something new, and let's see how that goes. And that's how we came up with the At-Risk Children's Program.
Okay.
Okay, I'll still go back to, you know, the social investment program. You know, we have been part of the NESG for a while, and we know some of the marvelous work you have done in collaboration with the NESG in terms of setting up the, you know, Nigeria Social Investment Program, and even, you know, an arm of the NESG, that's the Policy Innovation Center at the moment. So we'd just like you to highlight, you know, some of, you know, the impact of the work of the NESG in terms of, you know, the NSIP program.
Well, it was work in progress. It was important for me because Nigeria was so vast that we have as many people monitoring and giving us feedback on what was going on in the grassroots, in the communities, because there's this corruption is not just there. You found children cheating their parents once money gets, you know. And so we engage different monitors. You know, there's ANIJ. It's based, I think, it's an organization that had 700 monitors around the country. We had Action Aid, you know, getting CBOs for us, giving us response on, feedback every quarter. And the more I saw, the more encouraged I was. The more challenges I saw, the more I felt, yes, we can resolve this, you know. And so we started working in that sphere. The NESG, it was basically about behavioral change. It came to the fact that people need to change their behavior, right? And it's the way people perceive things. And I had a good conversation with NESG. I was a bit concerned, you know, even the translation of the words, what a grant is and what a loan is, you know, how we say it for people to understand that this is not just largesse, you know. For this trader money, for instance, it was about building a track record for these people who will never see maybe 10,000 naira. They don't know where to go and get it. You understand? So if you pay back that 10,000 naira within 6 months, you now have to open an account, and that you can get 30,000 naira. And then if you pay back that 30,000 within 6 months, you now get 50,000 naira. And so people that were entrepreneurial at that level really grabbed the opportunity. Of course, then we saw, as we were monitoring, it was about 36% repayment rate, which for me was a good beginning, because it meant that, yes, we're losing money, but when you think about how much was spent to set up AMCON, trillions, we only spent 2 billion naira on people who really need it, who don't know where to go to get 10,000 naira unless they know Sheriff or they know Japo. It's true, you know. I remember so many incidents, you know, walking into the airport. There's this chap that followed me, and I actually thought he was a druggie. I was rushing, and he said, Hajia, SIP. Then I turned, And he said he just wanted to say thank you. Wow. That he got this 10,000 naira, he pushes wheelbarrow of water. He sells water. And that now his brother has joined him in the business, and that they are making money, and that I just felt so fulfilled that at least these people that really need the money. Of course, you find people in the elite. I've been on radio shows. How much is 10,000 naira? But you don't live their lives. Their realities are that unless they know somebody that has the money, it's not. They don't know where to access the money. But if the bank sees that they've paid back twice, thrice within the estimated time, they can go into a microfinance bank and ask for 100,000 naira to grow their business because they already have this track record. And we had a lot of data on where they lived, and we kept encouraging them to pay back, So for me, it was really about knowing what the challenges were. For that for me was the success. Being able to get the feedback and knowing how to resolve or address some of those challenges. The poverty we encountered, many times had been in despair. I won't lie. There's a woman who said to me in a village in Kogi, she said finally she can give her husband a bath with soda. Soda is this locally made. Yeah. She said her husband had been paralyzed for about 4 years. All her children had left, and she couldn't afford soda. And then, of course, with the cash transfers, we realized that there are a lot of needs. So using the money on those needs would mean that they won't grow the money. So we also had a program that trained people in the wards. We called them community facilitators. And for all the wards where the cash transfers were happening, we had community facilitators that would visit the beneficiaries every week, talk to them about financial literacy, save 1/3, invest 1/3, and then use 1/3 for your immediate necessities. So if it's the wall that has fallen down, or you want to, anything that you feel your daughter is getting married in your mind, that's priority, you can use 1/3, but don't cross that boundary. Then keep 1/3 for a rainy day. And then if you have a business, let's help you with that business, even if it's making what do you call it now, sweep, what you used to sweep, these local fronts, whatever it is. Let's see how you can use that money to grow that business. So the community facilitator thing was they were staff of the local government that were identified and given to us. And they came in handy because the FOI Act actually says you cannot display the names of beneficiaries of cash transfers. And I kept getting those letters from FOI. But I had all the names, the numbers, the locations of the community facilitators. So I would give them that. Even naysayers, even journalists who didn't believe us, call this person. If you want to go to the ward, they will lead you to the beneficiaries. And so that really helped us, and NESG became a really, very supportive partner because they saw that we had the passion, they saw that we meant well, and that we tried as much as possible to ensure everything was ethical, it was transparent. And if we were told there was any mago going on, we blocked it. You understand? So they partnered with, I think it's called Busara Center and Accenture. They set up a unit, and they now went to those same communities where we were working, and they confirmed that these things were happening. And they tried to even develop messaging that would support a better understanding of what we were doing. And at the end of the day, I was very thankful because NESG became one of our cheerleaders because they understood that, yes, we're trying to do our best, And so this is the story. This is the story.
Very awesome.
Yeah.
So that the word is getting out. Even for those that probably didn't hear before, they're getting an opportunity to hear now the story of impact.
Yeah, and it was so. I was thrilled to know that it was now being institutionalized. Yes,
The
because
challenge is the poorest of the poor, because now if we say times are hard and most Nigerians obviously cannot eat 3 square meals the way they say it. I wonder what the square about the meals, but then, but what's the definition of the poorest of the poor now? Is there a profile that can help us navigate that whole experience? Who is the poorest of the poor? How do we know them?
so we used to do work with under a certain dollar amount and all of that. But with this, what we use now for multidimensional poverty, it's about much more. It's about nutrition, it's about your house, your location, whether you have water. We started the social register, the National Social Register, that also the governors tried to shoot down. Problem is we don't keep going to the governors, give us names. So we also got into trouble there. We go into the communities, teams are set up in every state in the Ministry of Budget and Planning. And in that ministry, we ask for a team that we call the SOCO. I think it's State Office, SOCU. Okay. Under NASCO. Each one of them had a team that had gender analysts, they had the enumerators, they had the project manager. They would go into, so we would look at, NBS had its own poverty mapping. So the poorest senatorial district first is where we started. And we'd go there, let's say on a Monday, and say, we're coming on Saturday to come and engage the people, speak to the community leaders. On Saturday, we go there. We encourage focus group discussions, the women together, the men together, the faith-based leaders together, however it is that the community wants it, but how they're comfortable to be able to speak up on what they think, and we would ask them, what is poverty in your own perception? What do you think poverty is? They come up with those parameters, and then we say, okay, which households in this community actually fall into those parameters? Then, once they write down the households, we put them together as a plenary and we read out the names. And there's a debate on, do they agree, do they not agree? And I'll give you an example. Of course, there's the subjectivity of, there's a community leader, a chief in Oyo State, that said he is also poor. And nobody could argue with him. The same thing with an imam in one of the communities in Jigawa State. So his name went down. You understand? In Borno, one of the communities, I encountered a man standing up to say, these parameters, I fall into them. But because 3 of my children have become Boko Haram, I'm stigmatized. And there was a debate and his name was put back. You understand? So we want the community to agree. Now, once that community agrees, our enumerators were all given tablets. And it had a formula on it. And they would go to each of those households and ask certain questions. I think we had like 24 fields. How many people in this household? How many people eat from the same pot? Female. How many male? Any person physically challenged? Do you have a roof? Do you have running water? How many, assets do you have? And we got very interesting some. So that chief had a very old Peugeot car. So you put it in, we enter what you have. Some people would say we have kettle, we have prayer beads, those are the things we entered. And it automatically ranked them from the poorest to the least poor because of the formula that was already embedded in the tablet. And then we only paid the people from the 6th quintile down. So even though that imam is still on that list, he never got a cash transfer. You understand? Because he was eliminated because of the number, his assets. or maybe the number of people. We wanted age range. So we got to know a lot of information. In fact, when we were doing the NSR, we were also doing community profiling. So we would ask them, where's the nearest school? Where's the nearest primary healthcare center? What are the road networks to your community? Is it riverine? Is it a path? Is it a road? We wanted to know the networks that operated in that community. Is it MTN? Is it for payments? Ultimately, we wanted to know whether you had a supermarket, a police station. All of those things were entering, because I know in one of the states that one particular community didn't have a school for 5 kilometers. And I asked the governor, how do little children go to school? So that kind of information is useful when you want to set up your infrastructure. So you know where the needs are. If you have more than 500,000 people living in a community and there's no school, then there's a problem, and as governor, you should actually address it, because it's not the federal government that's going to come and do this for you. Now this information is collated by the states. Once they get all the information together, they send it to us in Abuja. We have an entity called NASCO that reported to me. NASCO cleans the data and then takes out the lowest 6 quintile and sends it to the cash transfer in Abuja, who now sends it back to the state. They go and identify the households, select who the breadwinner is, mainly female, or mainly the female in the family or the breadwinner. And in all cases, we had people that were physically challenged. They were always they are the people to pay. So we will get their account numbers. In many cases, they didn't have account numbers. So we had to do like a due process for payments. And some banks offered initially, but after the first trial, they realized it was too expensive, going to pay in those communities. So we started doing a trial to see if we don't have to pay cash, because they would have to travel there. And we would now announce that, okay, this is day for payment. So all those people who had been identified as central to the family, they would come and line up. But it also meant everybody knew they had been paid 10,000. You understand? And as soon as we leave, we get the monitors telling us, oh, the men are drinking. You understand? Or the youth are demanding. We are the ones that put your name on that list, so you have to give us a levy. You understand? So there are many issues that happen. But so we said, okay, it needs to be anonymous. It needs to be timely. Some of the banks could not go on certain dates, and because of the insecurity issues. The fact that you live in that place doesn't mean you can't be supported. So we started working. In fact, we did a trial just before I left. And it was very, very encouraging. How many microfinance banks how many agents actually stay in those communities? You have to be consistent. Because if a woman has 10,000 in a wallet or in her account, and she comes to the agent to pay her, in fact, across the world, she takes the 10,000 first, because she wants to be sure that her money is there. Yeah, but if you want to be able to save, right, the woman should be encouraged to take what she needs at that time, so that if she comes back tomorrow, you are there. And that will give her the confidence to leave the remaining money. But if there's no agent there, then she's going to say, when I need the money, he won't be there. Absolutely. So she does not believe in the system. So we started even toying with, engaging people who, like in Zamfara, people we knew who had fuel stations in the communities. And we had agents who would go dressed on a motorbike because they had money, and we'd send the money to those people, or aggregators anyway, or even people who sell fish in bulk. I remember in one of the states we were using that person, so we could get the money from him directly to pay those people. It's a long story in terms of how we're going to be able to address this. But every step counts. Yeah, every step counts. It's a learning process. And we didn't have all the answers. We just used to try every time to resolve as we went along. And the more information I got, the better, Later on, I heard, that Action Aid Centers, this thing that had a lot of people are cheating. And so it means it wasn't successful. I said, on the contrary, I think that is the success. Because we're now getting feedback on the people being cheated and the methods used.
So you can always refine.
So we can always refine and keep moving. So long as we're reaching the beneficiaries, we're trying to understand where their challenges are. And so this is how the social register began. And every time we started in a state, I would go and meet the governor and explain and all. But after that, the World Bank was giving the money for that to NASCO, not to our office. And so they would pay the people, the community facilitators, for the training, for the setting up of accounts. Banks don't like for you to clear all your accounts because setting up also means opening a new account is another cost. You understand? So how do we address that? Our trial period actually showed that some banks were willing to do that because going there itself was a cost to them. So it was a matter of patience and holding the hands of people who have the need.
But it really helped our viewers and even us understand, the amount of work that went into, creating the Nigeria social register, our social investment program and all. But, you have done a lot of work across various institutions, and even for Nigeria. In the NESG, we always say our work is in the national interest. You've obviously done a lot of work in the national interest. But at this moment, we'd like to understand, what do you think inclusion should mean in the Nigerian context?
I'm definitely not a Trump. I believe in DEI. I think we need to get our political class to arrive that there are certain areas that they need to step back from, because it's so important to have the females in, because the woman is at the center of it all in the family. Statistics show that if the woman goes to school, she goes to primary school, she pushes that her children go to secondary. If she goes to secondary school, she pushes that her children go to university. If she doesn't go to school, she really doesn't think about it. She doesn't place any premium on formal education, which now explains why in the Northwest we have a high rate of early marriage. Girls that haven't been to school, they don't have the networks, they don't have the understanding of what education can do for you. It opens your eyes, it gives you agency, and you learn, you have networks that you can fall back on. It's not just literacy and numeracy, it's about knowing how to look after your environment, your nutrition in terms of food for the family. So if we don't get that right, we're going to continue lagging behind, But you're not countering a narrative that has become entrenched. I make bold to say we have a lot of pedophiles who want to marry little girls, and say they draw illustrations from what may not even be the fact in Islamic law to defend themselves. So it's a problem. You understand? And I don't have a turban, I don't have a beard. So I'm not an authentic voice. So getting those voices who have turbans, who are seen by the community as people who understand, organizing them. And I'm so thankful. We have people who are very progressive, who understand what the issues are, who are now trying to organize all of this, to debunk these myths. Because if we don't do that, we won't be able to make progress in terms of development. The death of development has led to the humanitarian issues. People fight you once they feel you're taking the rug from under their feet. The status quo benefits a lot of people that are already in position. Now, they're not going to fight to change the status quo. because they benefit from it. So it has to be from the outside. People who are seen as credible, who actually come into that space to say no. But there's this other illustration. And I'm sorry, maybe I need to go back into the faith again. If your background and your experience informs the way you understand what you're reading, right? So if it's just the two of us that maybe we understand Arabic, but it also happens in Christianity. I watch people, pastors on the pulpit, speaking as if God speaks to them alone, as if they are the only ones that understand, And I urge that everybody seeks for the beauty, the fairness, the justice, the universal principles that permeate our faiths. We have all these people who arrogate all knowledge to themselves, but it's only God that knows. So there's a word in Arabic that is tree, and you and I are the only ones that speak Arabic here, and we understand Arabic here, and we're asked to tell everybody else here what tree is. And we may live in the same community, but in your backyard you have a tree that has flowers, never had leaves, it's just a bark. I have had flowers and fruits and all of that. You'll stand there, even if you don't have an agenda. You're going to stand there and say, this is what a tree is. I am going to stand there and say, no, you're wrong. And maybe God Almighty is speaking to the fact that the tree is a shade. You understand? And he's speaking in that context. So the humility of even saying, in my understanding, is not there. I try to out-argue you. You to tell me, no, you don't know. You understand? And at the end of the day, I've been told a lot of the time by my uncles who I was brought up by, Allahu A'lam, it is only God that knows everything. So when you speak, at least respect, humble yourself to the word, because that word can be interpreted in different ways. And I say this, not as a critique of faith, because it is faith that drives me, but a critique of people who arrogate to themselves all knowledge when it comes to faith, because nobody is God. We're all mortals. So you find, why do we have even differences in the word, in Bibles, We have the same James version, because people understand it differently. Because your own understanding is informed by your own background and your own experience. You understand? So, and it's for Quran, it's in Arabic. How many of us speak Arabic? So what I have tried to do, and I'm certainly not a scholar, is to read as many interpretations as possible so that I get a sense of what is being conveyed. And even then, I don't have the answers. But I can only continue to push for what is universal. This is faith, this is justice, this is fairness, this is compassion. Those are the things that are unarguable. You understand? So, I don't know if I've answered you.
Yes, you have. Sorry, I was just going to ask a follow-up to that. Obviously, in this part of the world, faith is very
strong.
Important. It's strong. We hold on to our faith strongly. And in a way, it has influenced a whole lot of our actions, our behaviors, and sometimes, to an extent, the political class in terms of decisions that they make. So, but how do you think we can employ faith now in reducing poverty? You understand? In a way where our leaders, we can do things differently, and maybe in a decade or two, we can say, our faith has helped us.
I'm saying people drive what is personal and not faith. Ironically, poverty, in a family, a child is not meant to support the parents. But we have children begging, being sent out to hawk in families that are Muslim. So when your need is there, you forget what your faith says. Your child is not meant to support you. You understand? But then they make excuses. They say it's because we're poor. But there's no excuse in the faith for that. You understand? What we need is more and more voices telling them about the child's needs It's not about the man's right to marry the little girl. What about the girl's right? Because she has rights, and the girl is vulnerable. She doesn't have any liabilities when she's a girl. She's not mature. So it's not about, marriage is not about physical. It's also about mental. Why do we have such a high divorce rate? She's immature. She leaves her children behind. They get sent off because the man wants to marry again. They get sent off to do almajiri. You understand? And she goes back to her father. She has no skills. She has no education. She ends up in one of the states under ACP, because where we started off trying to work on children at risk. I went into Borno, for instance, and I met with a delegation of scholars who said to me, please lift the age to about 24, because we have those who have not gone to school at all and they have needs. And all they do, one of them, quoting him, said, they can only sell cola in the market. These are the people that are easily lured into dark spaces, you understand? So that's how we increased it. I went into another state, I don't want to say. I was taken into 4 brothels. We have, a lot of people ask me, why? What do you have to do with commercial sex workers? But talking to them, I mean, my entire experience, it was the most intense thing I did. I left, I couldn't sleep. These women, young ladies, many of them on drugs, many of them in all the brothels, outside there was someone selling drugs. You know, none of them had gone to school. None of them had skills. Every one of them wanted skills. Some of them had 4 children, some had 2. If you see their skin, or even the way they responded to me slurring, you knew that they were, you understand? But these people are they're invisible to us that live, you know. How do we support them? I asked them first, all of them wanted skills. Okay, we'll come and help you. But the first thing you need to do is subject yourself to some medical, you know, examination. Let's see how we can address that first, because you have to be, yeah, you have to be healthy to be. And they had children living in the brothels. You imagine what it'll mean. For there's a case I'm doing now. Very wealthy man, grew up with his grandmother who had a brothel. He's been married 7 times. He doesn't trust women. His wives would be speaking on the phone and he'd take the phone from them. She could be speaking to her father, as happened. You understand? He needs therapy. You don't know what's going on in those children's minds, what they're seeing, men coming in drunk, misbehaving with their mother. It's not nice, you know. And here we are living in our own comfort zones and thinking everything is hunky-dory. It's really very distressing, you know. But one by one, we don't give up hope.
Thank you, Matt. So this project, just a final question, because you've spoken extensively and it's like an eye-opener. Do you feel, because you've obviously done a lot, you did a lot, so is there some other way to communicate so that people can at least be able to appreciate this? Because some people will say, oh, okay, we did this, but we didn't feel it didn't come to us. I see this about the voice of the poor. Is there some better metric, you know, of making this money? Then secondly, in terms of...
Let's do one first, because I forget.
All right.
One of my failings was the fact that I trivialized communication, you know, and I didn't think it was necessary. When a budget is approved, it is not all the money that comes to you. The first year, I think we got about 16% of that budget. Now, if you have a number of activities that you need to fund, you need to prioritize. And for me, giving women this money or paying these cooks or bringing in new states that have indicated they have all their data ready, we verified, and they're a Nigerian state too, why can't we take them on, was more important than giving a journalist 200,000 to go to Katsina, Allah, or going to Arundis or going to, to confirm that this is happening. And initially I used to think, can't they just go? Can't they see that this thing is about Nigeria? But they want their transport, they want their accommodation. So I would make sure that these other priorities were funded and these other parts were not as funded. You understand? If, MacArthur helped, MacArthur Foundation, they actually funded advocacy and communication, but our budget itself was inadequate. We didn't get as much as was budgeted. Second year was 30-something%, the next year, and then when you think about the amounts we spend even on Empower, there are all kinds of moving parts. And you're trying to block and ensure beneficiaries, the money gets to the beneficiaries. It was only later, as elections were drawing up, people started saying it's untrue, we're lying. You understand? And we had a strategy session, and it became evident that I was the one that was at fault here, because we really should have given more money to the reporters to go and verify.
And possibly even communications.
And it's not cheap. No, we had a communications person, but I argued about the money, and so it's not really necessary for you to do documentary if documentary is going to cost us 25 million, because I'm thinking that 25 million I can support. Yes. Yeah, but when it was clear that I was the one that was at fault, these poor people, they don't have voices. Reporters don't go and talk to them. And if you live in Abuja or in Lagos or in Port Harcourt or Kano, or wherever the capital is, even the semi-urban areas, you don't necessarily sit down and talk with these people. You understand? So they need to be engaged directly for their stories to be heard. So at the end of the day, we now had to find money to give with the lists of the facilitators, those community facilitators. It was so much easier. A lot of people, even when I think in this administration, the minister, the first minister, was saying Empower was priority and all of that, I just shook my head, because they are the most vocal, because they are the ones that have access to social media. They have phones. You have to have a phone to get paid, right? Okay. So they're the ones that will trouble you the most. But there are needs out there. And those people are doubly, impacted adversely, because they don't even know who to call. They don't know how to reach people for help. You understand? So those people are just as important. You understand? So communication is very important. And any time I talk about this, I say we need to communicate for people to know that it's actually happening, so that it can justify the spending. The National Assembly were not too pleased, because I was not going through them. I heard again and again, we are the ones that know the grassroots. We are elected by them directly. Why can't you come through us to select them? But not everybody knows everybody. You understand? There are many, the majority in the community don't have to know you. And there was one person in particular, he's now passed on, so I won't mention his name. He told me, he said, you've done for everybody. What about us? You understand? And my business was trying to block all the, even in the development world, in government, money that is targeted at something, very little, a fraction gets to the beneficiary. Some of it is corruption, some of it is logistics, some of it is administrative costs, some of it is all of that. Development world too, they have consultants, all of that, the fraction that gets. Can't we turn this around? That the beneficiaries get the bulk of the money. Yes, there will be spending to get to them, but we really need to do better in targeting our beneficiaries and ensuring that the benefit gets to them before anybody. That they should be priority, not us.
Absolutely. So thank you, man. Now, with all the pushbacks you've mentioned, because obviously there are young reformers coming up, they want to pick up from where you left off. Is there hope for leaving no one behind? Because there's too many pushbacks. You have the intention, you achieved your milestones and everything, but it's still a yawning gap that needs to be filled. Now there are young people coming up and they probably hear your story and they say, geez, maybe I don't want to get involved.
No. I'm still standing now. I'm still standing, and it all depends. Success is defined different ways for different people. For some, it's having a lot of money in the bank, or having gold from here to here, or having a good name, or making an impact, So there are people that laugh at me when they see my car has broken down, but I'm still happy because I will still go to. The other day I was driving from Lokoja to come to Abuja. I was passing through Lokoja and I stopped to buy fruits. And the woman recognized my scarf. She said, my son got Empower. You are not going to pay for this pineapple. I begged her, I said, let me pay, I can afford it. She said, no, it's her own, that her son. So those for me are success. People that don't know anybody that were impacted on our programs. And just think what that has done to that family.
Absolutely.
That particular lawmaker said to me, before, if I go home, I find, in the mornings, they come and line up, my mother is ill, my children haven't gone to school, I need this for my... He said, now they don't come as many. I'm not as relevant, in other words. Because somebody's son has got Empower, somebody's mother is a cook, so nobody comes to me anymore. Come through me, so that I can be returned as the lawmaker next election. And I don't know when I said it, that this isn't about you, it's about them. You understand? And that now, you can imagine why I'm traumatized. So I think it depends. Our young people, there are too few people in government who try to do the right thing, because at the end of the day we got thrown out of the program. You understand? More people should come into decision-making spaces, either elective positions or appointed. They should accept to serve. I find that even though I have an NGO in Kano, the amount of impact I made working in government, federal government, and trying to use digital, and the scale of impact was much, much more than setting up my own. We have social entrepreneurs now. They make payments and all of that. It's a win-win situation for them. They shouldn't be daunted by the numbers. Every day, you add a few more, you save a few more lives, you help, few more families, and people are watching. When you least expect it, somebody's, as I said, when you least expect it, somebody just encourages you. It's like swimming against the tide now, but it's going to get better because more and more people understand why it's important to do this. We weren't born with two heads. Those of us that are here, we're just lucky. It's just by the grace of God. So you never know. When I started the At-Risk Children's Program, I used to look at those children running on the streets, and I used to think, how do we know that the cure to cancer is not lurking in that brain? And yet the opportunity has not been unleashed. There's just so much that can be done. So I'm not discouraged at all. As Professor Shiba just said, we did it, and it can be done again. We just need the people who have that will, who have that focus, who are determined, and who are not there to enrich their private, no vested interest here. Let's just do it the way it's meant to be.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And to our viewers, we've had here with us today Madam Maryam Uwais, MFR. She was Special Advisor on Social Investment during the Muhammadu Buhari administration. And to us, are we putting Nigeria first? With the discussions today, we should put our country first if we hope to defeat poverty and move the country towards economic development. At the NESG, our work has always been in the national interest, and we urge everybody out there to work in the national interest and put Nigeria first. See you next time.